Hello everyone and welcome back to the FSR Policy Briefcase, this time with Jean-Michel Glachant. Very welcome in our show here, Jean-Michel. He's our former director. For 14 years he has been the director of our school. Thanks for that. He's also still a professor and he likes to say that he's enjoying his life as a researcher now. And besides that, he's also still the executive vice president of the International Association of Energy Economics. So why is he in Florence? Well, tomorrow we're celebrating 20-year anniversary, but that's tomorrow. Today we're talking to Jean-Michel, the researcher. And as many of you know, Jean-Michel's work has always focused on building a European energy policy and making sure we try to complete at some point in time an internal energy market, or at least work towards that. So, Jean-Michel, are you happy to be here?
I'm so happy. And I will learn how to be brief. Last time I discussed EU electricity markets, it took me 2 years and 655 pages. I will learn how to do shorter.
We still have James.
Of course. Oh, yes, very happy to be here as well. And thank you, Jean-Michel, for joining us. Amongst these electricity experts, sometimes I doubt myself as well. Huh?
So today's episode is actually something special because we already interviewed Leigh Hancher, because Leigh, together with Jean-Michel and a few other colleagues, they made such an interesting report that we thought, no, we have to do 2 episodes of this podcast on the topic. If you've not yet read it, let me remind you, it's a really rich report on leveraging the energy transition, the role of long-term contracts.
Yes, exactly. In last month's episode, we spoke mostly about the role of long-term contracts within what you and your co-authors describe as World 1 and World 2. So sort of loosely defined, World 1 being the push at the beginning of the 21st century to transition away from vertically integrated monopolies and nationally closed borders and towards open markets, right? So World 2 then being the secondary empirical world of co-building a set of working markets, specifically the use of regulation to intervene in the pricing of peak periods in the wholesale market and capacity adequacy in the parallel market, as well as support schemes for nuclear and renewable generation. You can tell this is not my topic because I have to get in all these technical terms. With Leigh, we did begin to get into the World 3 by the end of the episode, so essentially the current world, one that you describe as fully policy-driven, where we expect to entirely decarbonize electricity production and electrify all professional energy consumption by around 2035. So we would like to focus this episode mostly on that current world as an extension to our first episode, getting your views on the reasons why long-term contracts need to be part of the solution and how. So just as a disclaimer to our listeners, these topics can be quite legalistic and technical at times. So although we will try and avoid jargon, Leigh does a very nice job of explaining and defining some of the key technical terms at the beginning of last episode. So yeah, I mean, really listen to that episode first to be up to date on what we'll discuss today, but also for any sort of technical references. But perhaps just as a brief reminder, when we talk about long-term contracts, these can either be private, i.e. between a producer and an off-taker at an agreed price and duration, I guess, for example, a power purchase agreement, or public-private, so between the government or public authority and a private consumer, right? So such as perhaps a contract for difference. We will try and be specific about which ones we're talking about when relevant. And yeah, perhaps to warm us up back into the subject, Jean-Michel, in the report, you argue that the treatment of long-term contracts over the previous 20 to 30 years now hurts the core of EU policy. So specifically the decarbonization agenda. Could you perhaps begin by outlining briefly the main reasons why you think that is?
It's very easy to understand. Private investors, private companies can really manage shocks, errors, peaks, etc. The proof is oil and gas industry. But they stay in control. As they stay in control, they are confident that errors and shocks will be swallowed. But if you look now at the electricity world, you see that public policy has a preferred tech or several preferred techs and push these and not the others, Also, public policy has a preferred amount of capacity, a bit strange if you think that you're a private company. And third, public policy has also a preferred level of wholesale price. We've seen that in 2022, 2023, and a preferred level of retail price. So companies or investors to enter this prefer to have some kind of long-term contract to know what money they will make and how they will recoup the first investment. Very easy to catch.
Okay, so implicit in this is that the investors, in order to meet this kind of decarbonization agenda, have new technology investments, and that, of course, implies larger upfront investment costs, and this kind of unpredictability, breeds complications and so on, and hence reform is required, right? So, of course, the drive to decarbonization is part of the EU's current energy policy agenda, but another priority is industrial competitiveness, right? Like that is extremely linked, this industrial competitiveness point, and therefore the reliance on cheap energy, and in this case, cheap renewable energy. So Europe's energy-intensive industries, as I understand it, were built on this sort of local availability of cheap coal, and with time that coal was replaced by natural gas, typically imported natural gas. Eventually, the economic viability of the industrial base of Eastern, Central, Western Europe became to a large extent dependent on this cheap, predominantly Russian pipeline gas, right? However, now the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the disconnection of this gas, and the economic conditions for these industries has changed as a consequence. And now we see largely they consume structurally more expensive imported LNG, often with state subsidies paying the difference, of course, with implications for the electricity market, with natural gas being the price setter. This is not necessarily economically or environmentally sustainable, right? It's a structurally more expensive product. So we're now asking these industries to electrify either directly or via power to gas, so through electrolytic fuels, renewable hydrogen and its derivatives, etc. My question is, what is the place of long-term renewable electricity contracts in this shift? Can they help to regain European industry's competitiveness, and why?
I like the question. I do not know the answer. It's a gamble and a crystal ball exercise. You have to come back to the roots. Huh? The roots, we are losing Russian gas. Shit. We predict chaos. We didn't get chaos. Why? We've been able to find gas. Okay, what type of gas? LNG. That's gas. No, that's LNG. LNG is 2 times, 3 times more expensive than the original gaseous gas. Yeah. If it comes from the US, we pay 2 times, 3 times. Okay, but the US companies are paying 2 times, 3 times less. How can we survive? Now, let's jump into what we are doing. Electricity in the future. Do we have the grids we need to have this enormous amount of renewables? In the Netherlands, in UK, in France, we are saying we would need 200 billion euro investment to have the grid ready for a full implementation of the greening. Do we have the integration of the renewable? Which means, what do we do when we have no sun, no wind? What are the reserves we use to secure the supply? Do we have fossil fuel shocks or anti-shocks? Will we pay always the fossil fuels at a high level, or will we pay them at a low level? If we pay them at a low level, how can renewables be competitive? Will we have demand to buy the renewable supply, or we will lack demand? If we lack demand, renewables will be unable to sell because there is no demand. What we are living these days, demand is too low. Sweden is also complaining that it has too much renewable, too less demand, and does not know how to equilibrate the two. Even things being announced by European Commission are not done. Maybe you remember that in May 2022, 2 years ago, Commission was saying we are going to 20 million tons green hydrogen. Okay, 20 million tons green hydrogen. How much renewables needed? 1,000 terawatt hours. That's 2 times what we were producing at this time on the announcement. Will we ever do? And I prefer to stop less because I have another page of similar remarks. It's very difficult to predict. If the entire world, from China, South Korea to Texas, Ohio, was in the same situation like us, it would be easy to predict. But China, South Korea, the US, they have no similar energy constraints, so they are not on the same path for access to energy and on the same path to price shocks. So we do not know.
Yeah. So decarbonization and competitiveness is a global issue. We're in a global competition for these industries, right? I guess, I've asked one question and you've come back with maybe 6, 7, 8, a cascade of more, all which very interesting.
Sorry.
But just to relate it back to the long-term contracts again, I mean, how far do they potentially go towards bridging any of those problems? Maybe just one or to some extent.
If we jump into 2035, 2040, long-term contracts have answers to everything because we need more manufacturing capacity for the equipment, even for the electrolyzers. We need more secure critical raw materials. We need the labor force, the financing. We need the corresponding grids, and we need this famous reserve. If we have renewable shocks. In 10, 15 years, all of this might be ready if we have a little bit of plan. So a little bit of long-term vision.
Yes. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. The path is difficult, but the target is clear and convincing.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've already spoken a bit to this point, but you often hear people saying that European electricity generation is not going to be big enough or cheap enough, quick enough to keep these industries in Europe.
All of this is true, obvious.
Yeah. So these critics would argue that the old model of importing cheap energy and raw materials and then sort of processing them into higher value products for domestic consumption or export is over. Perhaps, this is one scenario. They would say that instead of energy flowing to the existing demand, as it has done historically, at least as we've characterized it in the European case, the demand will now relocate to the supply, right? So is this your feeling? Is this your instinct? Again, it's a little bit unknowable, but do you feel that that is the way that it's going? And if so, do you think that long-term contracts for renewable electricity from third countries could be an attractive option to prevent that deindustrialization in Europe?
Unfortunately, I don't think so. If we import fossil regarding gas, we are paying 2 times more.
Yeah.
If we do not import gas, we have to substitute with renewables. To build massive renewables, we need manufacturing capacity, we need critical raw materials, we need labor force, we need grids, we need reserves. So, in a sense, we cannot stop transforming the EU industry, but it is painful and it is unclear when it will start to be really beneficial for many. So we are in hard times. I bring with me a book, unfortunately in French. The guy is the best economist we have for investment banks. Investment banks. What is the guy saying? There is only one way to be victorious in EU. It is to go to war economics. Why war economics? We are at peace. War economics regarding the fact that we have to invest, to transform, to invest, to transform for 15 years with no visible benefits. The benefits will be at the end. So we need a lot of faith into this guy or into our governments. Maybe in UK your governments will change. Maybe in France too. So the confidence into our governments might be very low these days.
And this goes into another conversation I would love to have, which is the difference between these kind of models of financing, because somebody coming from an investment bank is coming from a centralized perspective, right? You have the sort of central fund and you distribute it to the most economically competitive option, let's say in a neutral sense. But of course, Europe doesn't exactly function like that in terms of the allocation of funding and planning investment periods beyond political terms and all these kind of things, and perhaps the limitations in the fiscal budget where it is centralized in order to make those kind of long-term plans. But perhaps that's that might be a bigger conversation for another moment, but it's
a good remark. It's a remark on how we produce European level policies. Unfortunately, we have no European budget. European budget is 1% of European GDP, which is nothing. So we have European policy with no public financing. A bit stupid. No?
Thank you. So I'll bring us back to energy economists. So during the last crisis, there was a really interesting conversation going on among energy economists, not only among stakeholders, among policymakers. And you had some economists that were really convinced. I think all of them agreed that there is a bigger role for long-term contracts. That, I think, was not too controversial. But then towards how to approach that, I think there were really different opinions, right? Some were saying governments have to step in, governments have to sign these contracts, like James already referred to them, contracts for difference, CFD. Others were saying, no. We don't want governments to do that on behalf of consumers. We want private parties to be able to sign long-term contracts themselves, right? Some of them will, some of them will not. Some of them will sign one type over another type of contract. I had the feeling you were more on the second, but still it was remarkable to see how divided experts were. So what would you say about that, Jean-Michel?
First, it is normal that experts are divided because we are jumping into the unknown and we have little experience of this type of unknown. So it's normal. Second, I have my own opinion. Why? It does not matter much. What is his opinion? His opinion is the following. I have nothing philosophical or economical against public intervention, public authority. I'm not alone. Come back to MIT, discuss with Paul Joskow. Paul Joskow is saying, electricity markets, they are gone. Now we have hybrid electricity systems. So free markets, forget it. They are disappeared. You still have Bill Hogan in Harvard saying, no, it's not true, but, or Texas saying, well, it's not true, but we are sorry, they are gone. But in Europe, we have something else. What is this else? We have 27 states, so we have 27 governments. If we have 27 governments intervening in 27 ways, we are going to destroy the European economy. We are going to go back to 27 national economies. Is it true? Lena Kitzing report, read it, all of you. In March, I assume. Lena is saying, long-term contracts with CFDs. We have 7 families of CFDs, even a little bit more, because if we move parameters, we can go to 30, 40 types of CFDs. So each country can have a special type of CFD conceived for the country. And then we are killing the European economy. If you want to kill the European economy, then you are doing. If you want to keep it, if you think that in the transformation of the world we are entering in, we need a large economy, and we need people winning something to be able to implement their winning finding everywhere inside the EU, then you have to keep this market open. That's the Letta report. Letta was Prime Minister in Italy. He's saying, we have to keep the internal market, we have to make it stronger and resistant to national fragmentation. That's why I'm not keen to see 27 governments doing 27 different things. If we can have a European frame, homogeneous, for public intervention, I'm fine. Nevertheless, I will keep something for the private sector. Private sector are also public companies, like EDF is a public company, but a company doing on its own. Why? Electricity was a very massified commodity. It is becoming a diversified service. Why? You can put into your generation set a bit of wind, a bit of solar, a bit of batteries, a bit of flexibility of demand. You can even stop your factory for 1 month if you can do. And you see that the way you will combine wind, solar, battery, flex of demand will go according to the particularities of the consumption in your own case. For this, you need private contract, private arrangements. So do not do us, the Europeans, entering into the unknown of many, many changes. Do not do the error of giving to civil servants like me the right to define the public contract, and only this public contract is defined, only is protected, only is de-risked. We should de-risk also the private contracting. Fabien Roch, with Compass Lexicon, made an offer to Eurelectric to de-risk all private contracts together. Why not? We have to look at it. And that's why I would prefer having something public but Europeanized. After that, pure private contracting, and also private contracts being de-risked with something, making them easy to resell. That's my ideal view regarding the contracting.
So long-term contracting, yes, but let's keep some innovation, basically.
Yeah. Innovation in the private sector and homogeneity, coherence on the public sector, on the public policy.
Thank you, Jean-Michel. James insisted he really wanted to pick your brain on the current situation and long-term contracts, but he did allow me at the end to go back in time and to ask you something at the very early days with the sector inquiry.
He was not bored.
I think he was. And at that time, you were already discussing long-term contracts, and that's when most seem to have agreed that at that time, long-term contracts were, maybe having more disadvantages than advantages. Or did you already disagree at that time? Could you just give us a bit of insights in the discussions that took place?
I was born French, which is not a crime. And when I was around 50, I discovered that in Europe, the other Europeans are not French. So I started to discuss with them, and it took me many years to identify that the way French do things are not necessarily the best, and even if it was the best, how do we create something in common with the others? A European industry, a European market, a European system. We have to do together, so we have to share something. I discovered this. It was a shock. It took me many years. After many years, I understood that we have to combine what works in different countries and make them going together. Most of my colleagues, including me for long, most of my colleagues were thinking, no, electricity is regulated, electricity is public, markets are useless, only for speculators to make money, and any consumer will be better treated by a public company regulated than by anything else. Okay, you can think it, but you have to demonstrate. As soon as we started to demonstrate, we have seen that it was not true. That even the French nuclear bloc was very happy to use the Swiss capitalist hydro at certain time of the day or certain times of year, and at other time of the day, the night, to send back to this Swiss capitalist the good public French nuclear. So we can arrange, and this was an incredible experience. And when I entered the team of the report in 2006, I was already convinced, and incredible, maybe you won't believe me, Paul Joskow in MIT was against the retail market. Paul was saying, it's useless, this industry is managed by engineers, they know better than anybody what is good. Okay, wholesale market, I understand, because you have different tech, different energy resources, but retail market are absolutely useless. Well, and what do we see today? Go to the British company Octopus. Octopus is saying, do you buy us electricity? Because we are not selling. We are selling charging batteries for EVs. We are selling empowering heat pumps. We are selling the demand flexibility that you are offering us. We are selling what you cannot produce with your PV on your rooftop. We are selling the management of your own batteries if you do not know how to manage them. So it depends. Electricity disappeared. Electricity has become 5, 6, 7 different services. It is so true that even in the country of Elia, the TSO is saying we should use sub-metering because 1 meter in a single house is not enough. We should have a meter for the EV, a meter for the PV, a meter for the heat pump, a meter for the flex, and maybe this household will sell or buy to different people, or take an intermediary who will sell or buy to different people. So you see how much the understanding of energy and electricity change, and on the top today, we want to decarbonize, so it has to be put everywhere, and on this James was good, and some of us would prefer to have it local. I can give you my example. In Paris, I am member of a solar cooperative. You think I am crazy, but I am crazy. I am a Parisian, I am a French citizen. I want to have my own solar energy. Why? To show to people that professors have money, but they also invest into changing the world. That's my answer.
Thank you, Jean-Michel.
So Jean-Michel, you've taken us from this world 1 into world 2 into world 3, present day, and you've seen these transformations across the 3.
Right.
It's been a real pleasure to listen to you talk and espouse about the different experience across these 3. It seems like there are a lot of ideas out there, some of your own, some with your co-authors in this paper itself. You've mentioned several other authors who are working on this subject. It's just to bring us to a close. How do you feel? Do you feel optimistic about resolving the solutions for World 3 as we need it, having seen us move across these previous problems in the past?
If humans, particularly in the West, were serious with the amount of wealth they have, acknowledging the poverty my ancestors were in, not 200 years ago, 100 years ago. And I know it's the same in the family of Leo. So we did it for many, many, many items. Other items, we are not good. I acknowledge. We are not good with climate change. We are not good with urban pollution. We are not good with giving all kids education of this year for the kids having a job tomorrow and all his or her life. On this, we are not good. We can do. If we cannot do, what will do the sub-Saharan Africans? Do you know the average age in Africa today? 19.8 years. The average age of an African is 19.8. How this guy will enter the new world if we, the Westerners, are saying, I cannot do, my government is not good. Come on, we can do. We have to. And we did on many items, so we can do on one item more. Come on.
Super. Well, with that, thank you very much, Jean-Michel, for a motivating final piece to our listeners. And I really encourage for anyone who's taken an interest in this long-term contracts and really wants to get into the details of it, to take a look at the full report. It's extremely comprehensive, as Leo said. Yeah. And a very happy birthday, of course, which you celebrated just recently. So
I'm celebrating my 44. 44 after my master. 44 after my master.
Okay, super. Thank you very much, Jean-Michel.
Super.